You need help.
Why?
The destruction of Raccoon City should have been the end of the nightmare for many of our protagonists in Resident Evil. By that time, Chris Redfield was already on a different continent. Jill Valentine and Carlos just narrowly escaped after the missile launch. Barry and his family relocated to Canada. Rebecca unknown. Ada escapes, and Leon and Claire seemingly have that perfect ending after their one crazy night in Resident Evil 2.
That would have been one hell of a first date, though.
So that leaves Sherry Birkin. I mean, she did escape with Leon and Claire, so the logical conclusion was that she would start anew and be with Claire for the time being.
Hey, you guys can adopt me.
What?
Well, unfortunately for her, her life would not get any easier for the next decade or so, because the events that ensued in Resident Evil 2 and the other plot lines out of her control would still come to haunt her for years to come. So in this video, we'll cover the life and story of Sherry Birkin, in which we cover her original character design and role from Resident Evil 1.5 to her major part in Resident Evil 2, her life after the Raccoon City outbreak, and her current status as a government agent in Resident Evil 6. So sit back and relax as we cover the kind-hearted protagonist, Sherry Birkin.
Oh, why are you doing this?
Because I care.
Thank you, Claire.
So making her debut in Resident Evil 2, Sherry would be the main companion to Claire Redfield during her journey. Born to Annette and William Birkin, the two Umbrella researchers that created the G-Virus, Sherry would be known to have a lonely life, with both parents always busy at work, having no time for their daughter. The only token of any kind of family importance was a locket that Sherry received from her mother, though not knowing that this item holds a very significant secret that would make Sherry a target during the course of the game. But more on that later.
I can take care of myself.
So same as Leon with Ada Wong in terms of main companion in RE2, unlike Ada who can fend for herself, Sherry would be very reliant on Claire's protection, lacking the offensive ability like the others.
Claire, my stomach hurts.
But had her own way of maneuvering around through things to stay alive during this game, especially when we first notice her first running around the police department and scurrying in small spaces. So that has us wondering on who exactly was she? Why was she in the RPD station in the first place? And what role would she play in Resident Evil 2? Well, to that point, this would be the first conversation that Claire would have with Sherry.
Ah!
Wait,
Let me go!
easy, easy there. I'm not a zombie. You're safe now. My name's Claire. What's yours?
Sherry.
Do you know where your parents are?
They both work at the Umbrella chemical plant, near the city limits.
The chemical plant? Then what are you doing here?
My mom called and told me to go to the police station because it was too dangerous to stay at home.
From the look of things, I'd say she was probably right, but it's dangerous here as well. You'd better come with me.
But there's something out there. I don't know what it is, but I saw it, much larger than any of those zombies, and it's coming after me.
What was that?
That's what I was telling you about. It's here.
Sherry, wait!
What's great about this encounter was the ease of tension when the two officially met. The soundtrack was very calming, and the reassurance from Claire was heartfelt, giving the two a small sigh of relief from all the nightmare that's ensued so far.
Are you sure about that?
But as great of a moment this was for the game, the change in tone and tension would be made apparent quickly with the scream of William Birkin from afar, with a momentary relief gone just as fast. Though brief the conversation between Claire and Sherry, this was only the start of their bond for years to come. But moving forward in the game, Claire would encounter Sherry in many obscure settings. Even at one point, we're able to play as her for a small fraction of the game. Again, similar to how we were able to play as Ada Wong in Leon's storyline. But unbeknownst to Claire, Sherry was entangled with many plot lines beyond her control, because at that time, Sherry was a prime target by William Birkin, which at that moment, he was already infected with his own creation, the G-Virus. with this monstrous form of William following his basic instinct of looking for a viable host for his embryo, with the success to that was only with someone who was close enough genetically to William, which would produce a viable G monster offspring, because those infected with a G parasite from William and not being a close genetic match would have disastrous results.
I just can't take the pain.
And the G larvae would become this. So unfortunately for Sherry, being a target by her now infected father was only one of the worries she had to deal with, because on top of that, she would also be a primary target by the BOW Tyrant Mr X. Whose objective was to find and retrieve a sample of the G virus. And unbeknownst to Sherry, she was actually carrying a sample this whole time, hidden inside of the locket that her mother gave her prior to the events in Resident Evil 2. But moving along the game, the plot points would play out eventually, depending on which scenario we play. Sherry would be infected by William in the sewers, and now Claire has to figure out a way to save Sherry's life from the G virus infection, leading the two into the Umbrella secret lab. There, Claire would be able to create a vaccine for Sherry, saving her life as a result. But this aspect would be an important fact for years to come for Sherry's future after RE2, but more on that later.
Are you sure about that?
Though if playing scenario B, the main culprit would be Mr X and his objective to retrieve the virus from Sherry's locket, though that wouldn't end too well for him though.
Here, this is what you're looking for, right? Fine. Then go get it! Sucker.
By the end of Resident Evil 2, Leon, Claire, and Sherry would make a last-minute escape from the Umbrella secret lab and destroying William Birkin once and for all.
Push the switch over there! Got it!
Well, after going through that ordeal, you'd think that this would have been the picture-perfect ending for Sherry, where she would be by Claire's side for the time being. Well, unfortunately for her, it only gets grim from here on out, because the exact opposite would ensue. But before we delve into Sherry's life after the original Resident Evil 2, let's quickly go over RE2 Remake's version of her storyline and how that differs from what we've learned so far.
My God has protected you. It will always be with you.
Liar!
Sherry was first encountered at the lower levels at the RPD Station. Here, she's hiding from her father, William, who like in the original version was at the stage 1 of his G-virus mutation. What's great about this moment is that she sets the tone for the upcoming boss battle immediately. Already a stark difference in encounters between the two versions of RE2 was made apparent, showing us that the remake's version was clearly on a faster pace compared to his previous version. Also, another tidbit of detail here is that Sherry's knowledge of her father's infection. Because remember in the original, she doesn't mention that her father by name, instead referring it as a monster.
But there's something out there. I don't know what it is, but I saw it, and it's coming after me.
And same as in the original version of William Birkin's G mutation, here he still seeks out Sherry, with again having that basic instinct of reproduction due to their close genetic makeup. But after that encounter with William, it only goes downhill for Sherry at this point. Soon after making it to the lower parking lot area, we're introduced to the psychopathic chief of police, Brian Irons.
Sherry? I've been looking everywhere for you, Sherry. Brave little girl to leave your house in the middle of this mess. On the ground, hands behind your head.
This version of Chief Irons was dark, using a lot of manipulative tactics against Sherry, bribing her for Claire's safety, and this was of course due to Sherry's locket, again having an important role for the villains in this game to target after.
Stupid kid. Just hadn't dropped that fucking thing, I could let you go.
So this brings us to a new part of Resident Evil 2 Remake that wasn't present in the first version, which was the orphanage area and the subsequent tormenting from Chief Irons.
Where you going, Sherry?
Here, Sherry lacks the offensive base to fend off Irons permanently. Instead, would have to be resourceful and hide from the creep. So after playing a very intense version of hide and seek, William Birkin in a way would come to rescue, implanting Irons with the G parasite and resulting into this.
Your fault!
What? Get off me! Oh my god!
Well, as per usual, the luck of Sherry, the downhill spiral continues on, with not just William hunting her down, but now even the Tyrant Mr X was in on the chase. This detour would have us meet Annette Birkin and find out that she had Sherry locked up inside the garbage disposal area, and what's about to unfold was truly heart-wrenching.
Oh no. Sherry? Claire? Sherry, are you alright? What are you doing?
I'm here to help.
Sherry's been implanted. She can't be saved.
Are you fucking kidding me? You're her mother. Get in here!
You don't understand. William is still out there, and if I don't stop him...
This conversation is over!
Wait! Wait! I can treat her. In my lab. It's not far away.
Mommy?
There's not enough time. Millions of lives are at stake. Sherry, Mommy loves you, sweetie. Goodbye.
Are you fucking kidding me? Sherry, don't worry. I will get you whatever you need, okay?
Why are you doing this?
Because I care.
Thank you, Claire.
This amazing cutscene was so sad, yet was a pivotal point in both Sherry's and Claire's character development, showing the care and growth that they had for each other, which in contrast from what we've seen from Annette and the utter negligence she's had for her daughter. Also, as a quick point, the change in narrative on why Sherry went to the police station was mentioned, because in the original, it was Annette who told Sherry to go to the RPD station, telling her it was safe.
My mom called and told me to go to the police station because it was too dangerous to stay at home.
Here in the remake though, Annette did not want her to leave the house at all.
Why didn't you stay in the house? It was safe there.
Anyways, besides that point, this heartfelt moment between Claire and Sherry continues as they make their way to the Umbrella Secret Lab, with the goal of curing Sherry from her infection from the G virus, and finally making their escape. Also, remember that the locket that Sherry had that was so important for the many antagonists of this game? Well, we find out this would be the catalyst that would help gain access to the vaccine that would cure Sherry, which in the waiting moments, Annette would confirm Sherry's cure from the G virus.
She'll be weak for a little while, but... yes. She's free of the G virus. Did you hear that?
Though shortly after, she would succumb to her injuries and eventually die. Again, this emotional downward spiral for Sherry continues on, but in the end, like the original Resident Evil 2, she would escape with both Leon and Claire, seemingly have that picturesque ending that she deserved to have.
As long as we stick together, we'll be fine. Come on.
So far, the two different iterations to Sherry were both great, but my hat definitely has to go with the remake's retelling of her story, because all the small details that developed her character really caught my eye. Even the minute conversation she had with Claire about her losing both parents, and the fact that she showed empathy so well at that moment truly showed how mature she was for her age. Also, the overall emotional roller coaster she had in this remake definitely would have traumatized anyone if put in her shoes. And the fact that she had negligent parents who didn't spend time with her, and being alone to wander inside the RPD while having a mutated William and the Tyrant Mr X chasing after her, and having that evil Chief Irons torment her at the orphanage.
Where you going, Sherry?
and the subsequent infection she had with the G-Virus and the loss of her mother just right after her cure. Sherry definitely deserved to have a great story ending after both versions of Resident Evil 2, but unfortunately, this would not come to pass. The events that ensued after Leon, Claire, and Sherry's escape had me scratching my head as to why the sudden deviation from what was at hand. The epilogue that was in Resident Evil 3 explains these moments. Leave us alone. Claire Redfield couldn't believe Leon's words. Leon continued, "You're looking for your brother, right? Just go." Claire knew that Leon and Sherry needed immediate medical attention, but she could not waste any more time. I'll be back, I promise," she said as she disappeared into the wilderness alone. The first one had me questioning the actual writing in terms of storyline continuity, because as far as we know, Sherry and Claire did share that bond, and one would assume that Claire would take on the role of caring for Sherry for the foreseeable future, but the complete opposite happened, and I am very aware of Claire's initial goal of finding her brother Chris Redfield. But to change her stance of caring for Sherry so suddenly after their escape was baffling to me. This would be even more apparent if we played along the storyline from RE2 Remake, and especially after everything they've gone through and the character development they both had.
Sherry, don't worry. I will get you whatever you need, okay?
Liar!
Another epilogue from Resident Evil 3 would show the recount from Leon's perspective. Leon Scott Kennedy is confronted with a man who claims to be a US government agent. Leon says, "Leave Sherry alone. She's an innocent. She knows too much," the man replied. He looked at Leon and says, "But you have value. This is a good deal. Make your choice." Without regret or hesitation, Leon closes his eyes and then sharply responds. This was very interesting because it shows the important detail of how Leon came into contact with the US government and his eventual role of becoming one of their agents. But what's more pressing in Leon's epilogue was his concern for Sherry, and how that goes perfectly with the last epilogue slide here. "Do you have any relatives?" when the army officer asked her. Sherry Birkin did not respond, for she had no immediate relatives. Her father and mother died because of the G-Virus, and so this little girl holds herself with her arms and bites her lip tight. She thinks, "I'm sure she'll come back. She won't forget about me." So reading that after playing both versions of Resident Evil 2 really puts a depressing tone to her story. Again, that downward spiral of her life continues on, now without Claire at that moment. As we discover soon, Sherry would be placed into the custody of a US government official, making Derek Simmons, yes, this guy here,
We wrap this up. I do have better things to do.
the would-be national security advisor from Resident Evil 6, her legal guardian.
What?
A passage from RE6 summarizes Sherry's life post RE2 and just before the events of that game, which it reads, "Following the Raccoon City incident, the US government decided to take Sherry Birkin into custody and keep her under observation because of the trace amounts of the G-Virus that remained in her blood. Claire Redfield stayed by Sherry's side during the time she had to suffer through daily tests and experiments. While it was Claire who provided emotional support, it was Derek Simmons who became her legal guardian. Claire visited Sherry as often as she could, trying to help Sherry overcome all the trauma she had endured. Sherry idolized Claire and was determined to be just like her, a strong, capable woman. Derek was not without compassion for the orphan girl, and he allowed Claire, a civilian, to visit and comfort Sherry, even though the girl's existence was a closely guarded state secret. In total, Sherry spent 11 years in the hands of the government. It wasn't until 2009 that she was given any freedom.
Wait, what?
This important note of being in custody for 11 years until 2009 was truly horrifying, and one of the biggest reasons as to why she was finally let go and given somewhat of freedom was due to Albert Wesker's death. Because did you know that he posed a threat to Sherry due to her exposure to the G-Virus? This was a certain asset that Albert Wesker would have taken. Kinda reminds me of how he took Steve's body in Resident Evil Code Veronica because he was infected with the T Veronica virus. A note on this fact of Wesker's death allowed Sherry to be somewhat free was stated here. The reason the US government took Sherry Birkin into custody is twofold. One, they had hoped to study the G-Virus that remained in her blood, and two, they sought to protect her from Albert Wesker, who wanted to possess a sample of the G-Virus. In 2009, the organization Albert had worked for fell apart after he was eliminated by the BSAA on a mission in Africa. Sherry was thus freed from the threat posed by Albert and his organization. The government offered her a chance to leave their protective care if she agreed to come work for them. Sherry learned of how bioweapons had caused the deaths of countless people around the world, and she couldn't bear to think of others enduring what she had experienced as a child. She readily agrees to work as a special agent under the direct supervision of Derek C. Simmons. This information of Sherry becoming a government agent perfectly sets up her new and major role in Resident Evil 6, and the irony this time around would be her partnership with Jake Mueller, the son of Albert Wesker himself. So before we cover the plot of her storyline in RE6, the fact that this partnership with Jake Mueller is a direct mirroring contrast to William Birkin's and Albert Wesker's partnership, with the two fathers of our protagonists working on ways to create a powerful strain of the progenitor virus. Here, their children would do the opposite and eventually find a way to rid the world of the C virus. So starting her story in Resident Evil 6, it's been 3 years since she became a US government agent, more specifically part of the DSO, or the Division of Security Operations, a branch of the government formed by the President Adam Benford. Though employed with this part of the government agency, Sherry would take orders from Derek Simmons, the National Security Advisor. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that fact? Sherry's mission starts when she meets Jake Mueller for the first time, just right after he injects himself with the C virus, though unbeknownst to him at that moment. Also, the fact that he didn't show any kinds of symptoms of mutations like the others who took it, indicating he has immunity to the strain. This important factor would be the main objective for Sherry during her campaign, which was to get a blood sample from Jake due to the antibodies he has against the virus. This trait comes directly from his father, Albert Wesker, who also, like Jake, was immune to the many variants of strains that he was infected with, explaining why he never truly mutated and lost intelligence like many others, and if anything benefited from them and gained superhuman abilities. So going back to Sherry and Jake's campaign, the two would make a deal that would have Jake give a sample of his blood in return for compensation.
We need your blood.
Want $200,000 up front?
What?
$50 million.
Yes, we have a deal.
This would be the central point of the plot for these two protagonists, while being entangled with the many other storylines that converge with Chris Redfield and Leon Kennedy. Sherry would be in the midst of all the chaos, doing everything she can to bring back a cure for the US government. In the middle of all this, she continues to report to her supervisor on the ongoing situation, and I wonder who that could be.
I do have better things to do.
But whoever her superior is, I'm sure he's not some psychopath hell-bent on the destruction of the world as long as it fits his goals. Oh, and by the way, Sherry and Jake would be chased around by a tyrant-like being known as Ustanok.
Him again? Friend of yours? Or like an ex-girlfriend? Guy doesn't know when to quit. Welcome to the club. You get used to her.
But progressing along, we discover something from Sherry that was a direct cause from her infection from the G virus years prior.
What do I do?
Pull it out.
No, you'll bleed to death.
Please.
Don't say I didn't warn you. What the hell? You wanna tell me what the hell just happened?
Long story.
Yeah, maybe it's your blood they should be testing for vaccines.
They already did. More than I can stand.
This ability of hers was interesting to see, that even after receiving the vaccine in Resident Evil 2, the lingering benefits from the G virus was still profound within her, which is perfect that this duo would be part of each other's lives, since both have innate abilities that were a direct result from their fathers. And again, unfortunately for Sherry and Jake, they would be captured by Ustanok and company, and bringing them to China, which they would be experimented on for the next 6 months.
Where are we?
China.
Obviously, but
Where?
China.
After the time skip, Sherry and Jake would rendezvous, with Sherry's goal was still to gain a blood sample from Jake to prevent further spread of the C virus. This would have them right smack in the middle of the chaos that was going on in China. This compounded with the fact that her superior that we mentioned earlier was actually Derek Simmons, her former legal guardian, the national security advisor, the man directly responsible for the launch of the missile that would destroy Raccoon City years prior. But in the end, the two would make it out alive, Ustanak would be taken care of, Sherry would build that rapport with Jake, and finally be able to get a sample from him, and at this time seemingly have the happy ending to her story. Anyways, the significance of Sherry's story in Resident Evil 6 was her somewhat freedom after being in the custody of the US government for so long. The old actions that a then mutated William Birkin would be an important factor in Sherry's life, giving her the benefits from the G virus after so many years of being free from any mutations. And speaking of significance in regards to Sherry, before we end this video, her significance and role prior to the finalized version of Resident Evil 2 was noted here in what they would call Resident Evil 1.5. So prior to making her debut in the original finalized version of Resident Evil 2, Sherry would be part of the scrapped Resident Evil 1.5 version. Here she will retain some notable characteristics, having small different concept designs that may or may not have made it to the final release version. Also, Sherry's plotline is still relatively the same, with her making it to the police station and meeting up with the two primary protagonists at that time, which one was still Leon Kennedy, but the other was Elsa Walker, the Resident Evil 1.5 version of Claire Redfield. And following a very similar beat to the story between the two characters, Elsa would have Sherry as a mainstay character during her journey, seeing her in many areas of Resident Evil 1.5, which again would be their initial encounter at the RPD Station, their traversal through the sewers, and eventually making it to the Umbrella Secret Lab. Though a major difference between the unreleased version of Resident Evil 2 and from what we saw in the final iteration was that Sherry was not infected with the G virus by William, hence she would not be saved using a vaccine by Elsa, which if this plot point continued, her later abilities that we saw in Resident Evil 6 would have never been a significant plot point. Also, this lack of infection from the G virus could have Sherry be free from the US government custody, especially since she would be of no significance to any kind of experimentation due to the lack of the G virus ever being in her body. Though how much of a difference of outcome could have been for her, well, we'll never know. But maybe I'd like to think that she would have gotten that picturesque and happy ending that we saw in the end results picture from Resident Evil 2. Anyways, what did you guys think about Sherry Birkin, and where does she rank against the many protagonists that we've seen in Resident Evil? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you guys want more content like this, then please feel free to check this video here. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, you guys have a great rest of your day, and this is Hey DeVuH, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Got it!